Okay. Cool. How's it going, Ben?
Good, man. Nice to be finally talking to you in person.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was getting ready here. I was like, with all the things going on lately, and like the last couple episodes I did on the podcast, it was like only inevitable that you and I were going to sit down at some point and do that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited we were able to make it happen like ASAP rather than, later on.
I'm all about ASAP.
That's good, man. Like the first one I did there with Jeff, there was probably 25% of the conversation was about you and Jeff and ATG and everything going on. And then the next one I did with Keegan,
nice.
We kind of, linked everything together. Again, it comes back around to Ben Patrick and what Ben's doing and stuff. And I've been really kind of diving into you specifically as a coach and a person in these last 3 months. I think more than in the last year, right? Is linking with real movement now and the mentorship side of things and what you've been providing that way. So I'm really excited to sit down and talk about a few things.
Yeah, I'm excited to know more, about your background as well, because I see you on social on a day-to-day basis, but just, how you got into all this as well.
Cool. To kick off a few things here, I just wanted to know, like, are you training today? If you are, what are you training?
Yeah.
And maybe just like what you're working on, because I did see a couple cool things this week going on. I'm not sure if it's a rest week for you or if there's like some new things on the works here.
I mean, I never have a rest week. Yeah, no, I mean, as far as today specifically, I'm just home working online. So I enjoy my weekends in with my wife and my dog. And so I have a little home studio here. So I'll definitely, I like to stay active. I like to get up from my desk and do something, when you sit down for 10, 12 hours. So I'll do some stuff at home. But in general, yeah, from home, I'll just do body weight, dips, chins. I've got my like parallel bars, and I do my dead mills, my reverse dead mills every day. I love those. It's like keeps my cardio in,
Yeah, I got the whole thing on those actually.
Nice. And my wife will join me and do stuff as well out there. And I like to stretch at home as well. So just that kind of stuff. But in general with my training, it's kind of like a mixture of honestly trying to work towards my own goals as a basketball player with also trying to put my body through things for the sake of my clients. So I can't go as far as I would like. Like this weekend, I'm writing a program for throwers. And that's an example of an area that I can't go that far to turn my life upside down and start seeing how fast I can throw a baseball, how far I can throw a javelin. You know what I mean? I've lived basketball and I've lived a sport where knees are just brutalized, but I haven't lived a sport where the shoulder's brutalized, but people still want my help. So I'm writing them a program for a few guys. I wish I could live it. We've got this one, one lifetime is a long time. And unfortunately I can't go live that, but there are some other things I can live through. So I'm planning in 2020 to do a lot more Olympic weightlifting and just kind of see how I can make it, more accessible for athletes who really do want to do it. But as you and I both know, probably most athletes who want to do it really don't have adequate strength and flexibility, that their time would be better off just putting in more of the basics. So how do I bring that to them? Because if you want to do it, and if that's going to really get you fired up for your workouts and make you happy, that's it. That's half of training, I think, is that you want to do it in the first place, that your intention's in it. So that's an example of something I can really, put my body through and live, not only how to drive up the numbers, but how to safely learn the lifts for someone who's, is not in that sport, but wants to use it for the power benefits. So as you can see, you know, I do a lot of different things with my training, and I honestly wish I could do more, but I really am committed to basketball. And so I can only stray so far. So yeah, my training ends up, you know, pretty varied, kind of going where my clients take me.
Yeah, and I can only imagine with you know, the growth with, you know, you as a coach and ATG, that there must be a much more broad range of clientele reaching out to you now with different thoughts and training methods that, you know, looking to you for the knee stuff, but then looking for those opinions on like other elements of training and stuff too. So I can imagine it's getting a little different that way too.
Yeah, I'm writing a program for cricketing this weekend. A guy who's in India, and cool. He's one of the fastest, and we fixed his knee pain, but of course he wants, sir, please make me throw world record speed. You know, it's like, shit, like I can't go live that, but I can break it down in slow motion, and I can sure as hell do my best to put together a program for it, you know?
Yeah, that's what I respect about you as a coach so much too, is that you know, before you present something to these athletes or before you present a new idea, you put yourself through it yourself and show that, you know, this is what I found works best, you know, with these strategies. And I think that's where coaching, you know, and like Keegan and Real Movement and everything is going that direction as well, with, you know, how coaches are built into that mindset where, you know, you're putting yourself through that and you're demonstrating that, you know, you are able to do that, or that you've, you know, done the trial and error to see if it's worth your time or not based on your goals. Right. So that's what's really cool about seeing you kind of putting yourself through that stuff as well. Well, that's cool. A lot of world records being broken right now too, I see.
A lot of very minute, minuscule world records that not very many people are trying for, but it's still fun in the process.
Oh, it's cool to see that though. Like, and then, you know, my brain starts turning to it, and I'm like, well, maybe I could put some body weight on my back for some good mornings, or, you know, things like that. You know, it's just like thinking, you know, gets people excited about like all the potential that's in those elements. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of Knees Over Toes guy, because the excitement of what you're doing now, and, you know, what's drawn to you and everything you're doing now, you know, that pulls energy for me towards you. But hearing your backstory, where you came from, you know, the lessons you've learned, turning points maybe in your career as an athlete and a coach, like, I'd like to, you know, hear a little bit more about that, and even for the viewers and stuff and people listening, you know, hearing a little bit more about the evolution of you, kind of how everything got started.
Totally. So I lived the no knees over toes style. You know, your knee hurts, you do box squats, you're very sure not to put pressure on the knees. But I was obsessed with basketball, so I was kind of like the perfect guy for this, because I remember my knees got so bad at one point that I was convinced to take a summer off from basketball. And I actually thought that my knees got better in that summer, and I was avoiding anything knees over toes. And I actually thought that was the answer for knees. And I thought I had figured out my knees. But as soon as I went back to basketball, the problems were actually much worse. I tore up a bunch of stuff in my knee, had some pretty gnarly surgeries. So I realized from experience that style of avoiding knees over toes, it's fine if you're trying to just go into the weight room and avoid knee stress in the weight room, but then you wind up in life or in your sport with issues, and at a certain point you have to connect the dots that what you're doing in the weight room actually has the chance to prepare you for what else you're doing and protect you from that. And so it was literally, I have a pretty obsessive personality on anything that I try to do, and for me that was basketball. I mean, I once went like 4 years of shooting 500 shots a day, even if it was Christmas or whatever. I mean, I've done so many things that were just nutty. This was from age like 9 to 13. I shot 500 shots a day, every single day birthday, Christmas. At age 4, I didn't spend a dime until age 7. I saved up $1,000 working every job I could, age 4 to 7, to buy a Michael Jordan rookie card, which is worth $1,000 at the time. So that was just the personality I had, right? So I may not have gone to college for this kind of stuff, but by the time I even finished high school, I remember even freshman year of high school, I was sitting in class, not paying attention, reading on my laptop, just studying sports performance. And so I did this for 4 years. I must have read tens of thousands of pages. So after my knee surgeries and stuff is when I decided, because I had already been struggling with my knees. So from about age 12 to 18, I struggled. And it was finally at 18 that I just couldn't play through it anymore and had surgeries. And they said I had had stuff torn in my knee since I was like 14. I'd been just sitting with actual like structural tears. I'd been sitting with a fracture in my kneecap since I was 14. So now with all that background of already tens of thousands of pages I had read, all kinds of programs I had tried, every kind of jump program, now I was just looking for anything outside the box to fix my knees. Like that was, my life was just, so for about 3 years, I didn't play basketball. I really didn't have any friends. I was lucky enough towards the very end of that to meet my wife, but I was just an introvert, studying and then experimenting in the gym, And it was reading stuff from Charles Poliquin, where he was saying basically that I had to get as good as possible with my knees over my toes, as far as they could go over my toes, as deep as I could bend my knees. And he gave examples, and he recommended Keegan Smith. And then I found videos of Keegan, who was doing different squats. And I think he even had some examples of different reverse step-ups. So that gave me something I could look at and then go start experimenting in the gym. And I kid you not, like within 2 weeks of that, coming from that basketball background where it's all this kind of plyometric and balance performance training and the strength work, no knees over toes. So then within 2 weeks of this new stuff, honestly, I never looked back. And my whole life since then has been about figuring out that science better and better and better and better. And then when I wanted to make like online coaching and try to get my name out there, I just came up with the name Knees Over Toes Guy, because it would give me something on Instagram recognizable, because I knew I wasn't just trying to market, your average training. And that's the story up to now. I really did live on both sides of that fence. And so now, sure, there's been times in the process where working on doing certain exercises hasn't been comfortable. That's been a big part of it for me, is figuring out, okay, so you should squat ass to grass or whatever, but what if one of your knees has a bunch of junk in it and that hurts? Or, how do you progress into these things? But even treating my body like a rag doll for experiments, I've still come out unscathed by continually operating towards greater and greater knee protection in the weight room. And so someone who doesn't go through the hurdles that I did can bring about these changes without going through a lot of the pains that I did, which a lot of them were unnecessary pains of not knowing how to regress different exercises. So it's that you can see why I'm so passionate about it, because that same passion I had for basketball, I have that same passion now. And I mean, my last basketball session on the court 2 days ago, I had 2 NBA players, guys who are about my age, who are trying to work their way back into the NBA. So these guys have played, one of them 3 years, one of them 4 years in the NBA, made a lot of money, been very successful. I beat them both. And I'm a guy who was a nobody when they were superstars. They're guys who grew up in my area. And I know they're not listening to this podcast. They don't give a shit about strength training or flexibility.
Yeah.
So the point is, I still have that same passion for basketball. And so you can see how meaningful it is to me to be able to go out and play without any pain, getting to live out my dreams of being able to cut and decelerate and jump high and do all these things, you know. So it's being able to live out my dream now. It's still the same dream as when I was a kid. It's just that love for the game of basketball. And now then being able to help other people experience the same thing, it was like, holy shit, you know, there's my life.
Yeah.
Do this podcast when I'm 100 years old, and you really are wasting your time because it'll be pretty much the same story. I'll just probably have some new twists on it, but it'll be the, you know, it's a simple life.
I like that initial thought there about the weight room that you said, you know, that going to the weight room to get strong and not necessarily think about those real life scenarios that you get in.
Yep.
And, you know, studying you and the ATG methods you've been bringing to the table, you know, the last 6 months, I think that's what you guys are doing the best at, is that you're bringing those ideas and thoughts to the weight room like no one has done before. You do see some of it in the movement culture side of things with like Ido Portal and some of those movement individuals talking about, like, you know, training through these greater ranges, but it's more of like a body weight approach or something that I think a lot of athletes and stuff can't connect with. But I think that's what you guys are doing the best at, is you're changing the culture of the weight room. So now you're seeing athletes in the weight room, you know, training through range, training for these real life scenarios, like, you know, getting stronger that way. Whereas the old thought process was, you know, go to the weight room, get super strong in this short range or whatever it takes to get strong. And then next thing you know, your knees are over your toes on the court or wherever you are, and you're injured. Right. So that's what's been really cool, is seeing that change in the weight room culture. And we're seeing it change globally now with, the coaches taking on mentorship with you through Real Movement, bringing that to their gyms too. So, I like that idea of like how the weight room culture is changing, and that's really what I think you guys are doing an amazing job too.
Yeah, and I think that's where guys like you and me have a lot in common, is that we don't look at it like, if our bodies are broken down and hurting, we don't disconnect the dots that, hey, we're responsible for that. Our training is responsible for that. And so I think that this style of, like, you know, using your training to take responsibility for your health, and I think that's becoming sexier because people are starting to see, like, for me, I was dumbfounded when I started jumping higher. I was only trying to get rid of my knee pain. So then to see that the same thing that would bulletproof my knees would make me jump higher, now all of a sudden that became sexy, and then people wanted to train with me. And then you can see that if you look in other areas. So even for me, this was like an interesting discovery and observation. And then you look at a lot of Charles Poliquin's athletes. You know, these are people who would seek him out for, I can remember one guy who was like, had really bad shoulder problems, right? And so he sought Charles Poliquin out for his shoulder problems, but then ends up like breaking a world record in, I don't know what it was, like the shot put or something like that, wins a gold medal. So the very thing holding back your pain, whether it was a back pain or a shoulder pain or chronic hamstring injuries, or finding out that the very thing causing the pain could be what's holding back your performance, now it becomes sexy all of a sudden. Whereas before, I think we used to look at them as two separate things: performance training and training for health. I used to, and we used to think of training for health as basically being a pussy, right? And so I think now that people are seeing that the two are not disrelated, I think that's what's going to change things for people, because we all want to, I mean, these principles, I've helped guys drive up their bench press or their squat or their deadlift, and that's what they want, but they're having the pain, and then they come to me for the pain, and then they don't buy into it until they realize, holy shit, this can actually, and then they actually experience it, and they get stronger on what is the important thing to them in terms of performance.
Right.
So that's where I think we're really, and we're not there yet, like, but you can see real changes occurring. Yeah. And you can even see certain athletes out there at the highest levels getting awareness of that, getting awareness that, okay, flexibility is not just, something to be laughed at. It's actually what could make me millions of dollars. And so I think, guys like you and me, I think we're just going to keep pushing away and keep getting more opportunities with high level athletes. But that's also why I think that me and you and Keegan and guys like that are starting to bond together, because we realize that, we can become an army ourselves. And there's just so many people, not just athletes, there's just so many people that are hurting from a lack of awareness about, how the weight room can either hurt or prepare your body. So, I think we're all shouldering that load and realizing that just by banding together, even if we never did have a premier athlete, we can still accomplish it ourselves. Whereas I think some of us in the past would kind of stay in our little corners of the world thinking that it would never really become popular. I know that's for me a few years ago. I hoped that I would eventually get a famous enough guy to speak out, but I never really tried to expand outside of my gym's walls. I didn't do social media. I didn't think people would buy in. So it's pretty cool now to see that, bit by bit, that we have a growing little army.
Yeah. And seeing that, I've been there too, where you kind of think like the clients will speak for the training, speak for you, or speak for itself through your clients. But you're seeing now, like with your collaboration with Real Movement, that it's like the coaches are, becoming a part of it all. And now the coaches are speaking for it all, for their programming, for their successes. So that's just been amazing to see, is that through the mentorship of not just with clients, but with coaches around the world, sharing the knowledge and sharing with those coaches so they can pass it on to other clients is like a totally different way to look at it now, where it's not necessarily living through your clients, but living through the team and kind of like creating this army of coaches that are presenting this to everybody all over the world. It's like a totally different way of looking at it.
Yeah. And if you can as a coach yourself, prove your product, it just increases your chances of success. I don't want to leave anything to chance.
Yeah. So
of course I could just be a coach, and I am just a coach. I don't get paid to play basketball, but I want every guy that I work with, I want to go out there and prove it. And every guy who's maybe thinking about my system online, I want to prove it, because if it works, it should work. So it's just a way. And I have basically assembled a team of guys at ATG who think the same way, that it's like, yes, we could just be coaches, and we can sit here complaining about how guys who have no idea what they're doing have 500,000 Instagram followers and are training the top athletes in the world, or we can freaking do something about it and prove it and guarantee ourselves. So even guys I have working for me as form coaches that no one will ever see, I'm like, dude, you're my workout partner. We're making you a freak, because that's just going to help our business that much more, because this stuff does work. So, it's a different way of thinking about it, that it's taking more responsibility. When you take full responsibility, you take, responsibility for all sides of the equation. So if you're a guy on the court who knows all the team plays and can direct his teammates around, but if you can also go be a beast and go dunk that thing yourself, now you're going to win. You're guaranteeing that you're going to be a winner. So that's, to me, it's a responsibility thing that we got to go for. We got to take our shot. We have to do as much as we can with our own bodies to help, prove our product.
Yeah. There seems to be like a lot of discussion too around like people making that disconnect between athlete and non-athlete. I did kind of just put out a quick call out of maybe some questions that I could get before we talked, and I did get some good ones, and even people talking like, as I use your methods and ATG methods as well, a lot of questions about like, is this only for athletes or can this be, what would your approach be for a non-athlete? And I'm seeing that through like a lot of the real movement coaches that are taking on ATG methods and your methods are implementing those with non-athletes, general population kind of individuals. But I don't know if you had a different perspective on that. I just wanted to share some of your own opinions on that, because I get that question a lot. And I did get some people just asking, like, if I could ask you about, like, just your thoughts on, like, you know, these methods. You kind of already said it almost with the health and the performance training coming together,
Yeah.
but maybe just like, I don't know if you wanted to just share.
No, I have a strong opinion about that, which is, I mean, I identify with the non-athlete just as much as the athlete, because when I started coming up with correct methods, I wasn't an athlete anymore because my body was so beat up I couldn't even play anymore. So this is definitely not a system that can only be used by someone who's in tip-top shape. And that's something I get as well. People are like, oh man, I'm not in the best shape. Can I do this? That's the time you need it the most. So I think guys like you and me, I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg, and I think we do have to make it sexier. I think CrossFit is a great example. That's someone who is not in a particular sport can do CrossFit and can find an outlet, a sport for themselves. And I just think we have to keep working things to where it can give someone some real goals to shoot for, because that is the only thing that I find is that someone could struggle with motivation. Because for me, my motivation is the pressure that's going to be on me on the basketball court and trying to improve what I can do on the basketball court. So it's very easy for me to be driven and motivated. But say someone who's not an athlete, what keeps them motivated? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, to answer that question, absolutely 100%. We are all human bodies. We're all just on, there's no absolute athlete or non-athlete. We're all just on some scale of how much we use our bodies, but our bodies all have these same things in common. They're designed the same way. They have arms and legs, and, you know, and so I don't see any difference between athlete and non-athlete when I train them. I don't make a difference at all. I just look for the athlete on making sure that he's not overtraining, because they're often doing too much. But in terms of the training itself, there's no difference. But I do encourage non-athletes to look for something that maybe gives them a benchmark of improvement, whether it's a once a week game of tennis or whatever they like, whatever they like to do. Or I even just encourage them, use this to go be the parent who's like, can be super active with your kids. That stuff, that goes a long way when your parents can do stuff with you when you're growing up. Those are memories that kids do not forget. So I don't know. I mean, whatever it is, I know for me personally, I would want some physical outlet, but that's why I also want to take responsibility over the next decade or so, as we really become more formalized in what we do, to to have things that people can shoot for, that can make it more of a game, that can make it more, more motivating to do. Because that is the one thing I think, is that I do think my system would get boring for a non-athlete. It could. Yeah.
But I mean, you would use the same in addressing knee pain. You would use the same progressions you use, with ATG and athletes. You would use the same ones for general population, right? Like
totally.
Sissy squat. Like, you can progress all those things. I think you are doing those movements in a sexy way that intimidate people, that maybe, or other trainers that say like, oh, would I be able to use that with, addressing knee pain of this client that comes in who's maybe unconditioned and stuff? And you absolutely can, right?
Yeah.
In modifying it, and you wouldn't change that at all.
They scale so well. It's just, usually in my posts, you're not going to see the scaled stuff. You're going to see me trying to do the freakiest level I can, just to sell my product. So that's where there's a balance. But people are shocked when they see like how low you can really scale these things. That's why when I do teach them, I try to be like over the top, showing like just how low you can scale it, and how I actually have found that working through pain is like one of the only mistakes you can make, because that means you're going a little bit beyond the tolerance of what we want to be handling the load. So So the mechanisms we want to be handling the load, we don't want to push to the point of going beyond that, to the point where then you're actually feeling the pain. Because if you can put that stimulus, then you can adapt a little bit, and then you put that stimulus again, and then you adapt a little bit more. So that's really how it works. And that's another thing, is that people might think they might not be able to do some of these exercises, but they don't understand that when you start working with a 6'9" basketball player who's had a knee surgery, they are starting out worse than any non-athlete I've ever seen. Like people don't understand. I used to have almost like a running joke that I would, if a guy started training with me, I'd be like, well, it's not going to be a mystery that your knees hurt until you're stronger than my mom. And one for one, their knees were not as strong as my mom's. My mom's 120 pounds, 65 years old, and has stronger knees than a 27-year-old pro basketball player who's struggling with knee pain. What do you expect? And he's a force. This guy did a 485-pound trap bar deadlift with no training, just like seeing how strong he was. Yeah. Yet he couldn't squat all the way down and get back up.
Wow. Yeah, and that's the thing. People always relate the athlete to the non-athlete as if, they are so much more physically fit, and they, like Keegan says, looks right, flies right.
Yep.
But sometimes they just look right, but they don't fly right. And they look like they could do all these incredible things, and then you get them to do a 4-inch reverse step up, and they fall over.
Right.
And that's kind of like the big picture there, that I think a lot of people don't relate to that or see that. A lot of these athletes start probably even lower than the general population, right? So
they do. They usually have to start. Yeah, like when I start a basketball player, I usually have to start them more regressed than your average non-athlete. And they should be the ones best at it. Basketball players should be the ones best at these exercises, since they're, the more you're going to be pounding on your knees, the better you should be at them. But they've been pounded to death, and their strength coaches have avoided their knees, just continuing to jack up their hip power and plyometrics. So they're actually just like trained into knee problems. They're just directed and channeled towards greater and greater knee problems. Yeah.
And one of the things I always go back to when I did a podcast with Jeff Flexible, was he kind of honed in on how you guys make secondary primary.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the difference there, is where, traditional strength coaches focus on these primary movements, the squat, the deadlift, through full range right away without breaking it down. And I've been, victim of that as a coach as well too in my early days. And really what you guys have done really well at is take the secondary accessory movements that were always just kind of like, secondary, just looked at, kind of as not very important, but just there for whatever. And you've really made them primary movements. And that's been like a big picture with, I think, the turning point in the weight room and, the strength coach kind of era that's happening right now.
Yeah. I worked with, not to bash anyone, but I worked with an athlete who was trained by one of Charles Poliquin's top disciples. And he came into town to train with me. And I was shocked to find that he himself was having continual knee problems. And he had a super strong deep squat and is continuing to have knee problems. And I was just really surprised, because he was training with this top guy. So I was really dissecting all his training, right? And he was like, oh yeah, like he knew all the stuff we did and blah, blah, blah. But then we looked over his workout logs, and in the previous year, he'd only done a 6-week block of split squats. And it was not an A series, not a B series, but a C series that never. So even if you think,
I wonder how they would have looked too. Like, I wonder how the split squat would have looked, right? Like in terms of mobility, like the way you guys present the split squat is just so modern. It's a totally
split squats are A1 since day one.
Yeah.
Not 100%. Squat.
Yeah.
So because the split squat, it's nothing against the squat, but the split squat is actually senior to the squat, because this guy, like most athletes, did not have two identical knees. One had a little cleanup surgery on this. The other one has tendonitis on that. The other one, and so this guy was still struggling with his knees, even though he was back squatting like clean ass to grass, 500 pounds. It was very impressive. But even though the trainer knew of the exercises, it was still so traditional in terms of Olympic lift, compound lift, and then you basically do a few sets with no energy or intention on your accessory movements. No real energy. You know how much energy and intention it takes to do a split squat or a seated good morning? More than a squat or a deadlift, because you're not just focusing on your strength.
Yeah.
You have a lot of mobility going on at the same time. Every rep on a seated good morning, I had two guys train with me in person yesterday at ATG, and we worked on seated good morning. One from Hong Kong, one from Australia. My standard fee of $0. I don't charge guys in person. If you're listening to this, you want to drop in and train with me. I do that so that I can put my money where my mouth is. I'm an online coach, and I don't take anyone's money in person, no matter how rich they are. I've had near billionaires, and I say, come on down, I'll train you for free. Point is, their whole mentality changed on how to train the seated good morning when they realized how much intention I have on every single rep. So I got them to almost rebuild how they approach it. And then their mobility, you could see instant changes in how much actual stretch they were getting. Mm-hmm. They hit easy PRs in terms of how strong they were. And then now that is going to be laying a foundation to bulletproof them. But you just have to be realistic with yourself. So I wouldn't even care if a guy did, Monday squat and Thursday split squat. I'd rather have him do that and have full intention than trying to do like both in the same day twice a week. Now everyone has different levels of how much, they can really handle, but it's just an example. I'd rather see a guy break up his training and actually treat his accessory movements as primary movements. And then he'll actually get the result he's looking for. And then his primary movements will actually go up even easier. So even just knowing the right accessory movements, if you treat them like accessory movements, you get what you put energy on. So if you're putting 10 times the energy on your bench press as you do your rotator cuff, you're going to have shoulder problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many ways to bastardize those big movements and manipulate your body around them. Like, the back squat, just trying to find that depth to make it look good. But again, the intention, you can basically with those big lifts, you can make yourself not vulnerable, even though there's a crazy amount of weight on there. But now you're looking at the way you guys have presented these, what would be thought of as secondary exercises, and you've made them vulnerable. So it's like when you put a trainee into a vulnerable position, they're going to be so much more conscious of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the big game changer, is like, now, okay, seated good morning, I have to be so much more conscious of what I'm doing. And that's been, a big game changer for sure. That vulnerability in the movement for people to see, like, oh, wow, my low back is super weak, even though I can squat 500 pounds, or I have no VMO strength, even though I can, do all of this stuff.
Yeah. Or your legs are imbalanced from one side to the other, which is going to just chronically hold back squats. So I actually have, from training bobsledders, I actually have a lot of experience with driving up athletes' ass to grass squats, because they have to squat 200 kilo for 3 reps to get a 100 score. So I trained a group of 3 bobsledders, and I got them all to that score with amazing depth. But you either find that a guy has naturally stronger hips and is going to run into knee issues, or has naturally stronger quads and is going to run into lower back issues. And so without split squat and seated good morning, I would not have been able to just systematically drive up their squat. Now, in the case of the 3 of them, one of them, stronger hips, chronic plateaued. The other one, stronger quads, chronic plateau because of back issues. The third one, though, really pretty even. So he was the easy one. So he did squat, and it just went right up. He was the guy who could squat, and it would just go right up. But the other 2 couldn't squat as much as him and were just chronically plateaued. Then I put them through split squat and seated good morning to address, the weaknesses. They did 6 weeks of that every damn day. Well, 6 days a week, split squats and seated good morning. These are savages, just total psychopaths. You wouldn't put the average person through that. 6 days a week, split squats and see a good morning. So they did no Olympic lifts, no compound lifts. After 6 weeks, smashed their old Olympic lifting and squat numbers. And they then since went off, did their own thing, and none of them have touched the scores they had when they were training with skinny old me. No joke. They set their PRs training with me, have gone off on their own now, and can't hit the numbers they were hitting with me when I was training them ass backwards, but getting them to fix the sticking point. And here's a little bonus point for the guy who was like perfectly balanced. He also eventually ran into plateaus, but it was as easy as adding chains to the bar. And I mean lots of chains. I never had him do squats without chains. We'd only take the chains off for a test, and I got him to that 200 kilos, not including the chains on the bar. So he actually couldn't, I got him stronger with 100 pounds of chains on the bar than he could lift prior to training with me without even having chains on the bar. So that's just in a nutshell right there. You could see how to drive up someone's lift. But even the lift itself does not perfectly match the strength curve. A squat is not perfect in terms of what your body's capable of. Every inch out of the hole, you're capable of a little bit more strength. So for a guy with weaker knees, it's going to make less of a difference. Just drive up his split squat. A guy with weaker back doesn't make as much of a difference. Drive up his seated good morning and you look like a miracle coach. But then the guy who is pretty balanced, chains every damn session, and you just watch the miracles happen.
Cool. Very cool. For me, I think, well, like I've been getting way back into lifting again and I think one reason is just because I feel so good. I was, an injury plagued, and I got into body weight and flexibility work, and almost like was really resistant to going back to weight training because of how shitty I felt the last time I had done it. And that's been the game changer for me, I think, was with all this ATG work and addressing the knees and the VMO and everything, is like I'm lifting now more than I think I ever have in terms of like quality wise and frequency wise, but just because I feel good, it's almost that's the driving point behind it. Isn't because I want to get stronger. It's just because I'm like, I wake up and I'm like, wow, I could squat again.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I feel like I could just jump on the bar again. And I used to rest 5 days after a lifting session because I felt so destroyed.
Yeah.
That's what I thought I needed that much rest to get there. And I think one of the game changers for me has been the extra work daily with some of the knee stuff. Is like you do see, putting that secondary work to higher intensity as one light of it, and then seeing that you can use them, body weight wise, like once you get pretty proficient at them.
Yeah.
Like the reverse step ups for me are pretty much daily now, hitting those reps to warm up. And that's been a big game changer for me, is just kind of like how you can.
Well, here's why that works. Yeah. Here's a really good one for your guys listening. I need you to think from your ankle to your hip. I need you to think of your muscles and tendons backwards. I need you to think of them completely backwards. And so the reason why you're getting so much benefit out of this sort of daily work, right, is because your tendons, they need more blood flow to actually recover and improve. But your muscles, like the muscles themselves, they need the nervous system. And the nervous system just actually needs rest. So if you want to improve your deadlift, then you're going to have to fucking try hard, But if you want your knees and your joints to feel really good, you actually don't have to take as much rest as you would think, but you do have to get the blood flow to the right areas. So it's very interesting because, and so the reason this is, if you look at your ankle, because I try to do everything like not in a doctor way, but just like really looking at things from just like a function perspective, just function. And so if you think of ankle strength, well, we're not talking about the joint. What muscles are around it? Calves and tibialis. Those are not big muscles, but the Achilles tendon is the biggest tendon in your body. Now we go up to the knee. Now we talk about knee strength. Again, we're not talking about the actual joint itself. Well, we're talking mostly about the quads and the hamstrings. Those are bigger than your calves and tibialis, but the patellar tendons are smaller than your Achilles tendons, And when we go up one more, the glutes are now the biggest muscle in your body, but with even less tendons in your gluteal tendons to the hips. So your tendons get bigger as your muscles get smaller. And so you're working at like two different factors there. And so that's why, like, for me personally, even though my knees feel so great, I have a treadmill that doesn't work that I got for $45 on Craigslist, and I keep it at my house and I go reverse with it not turned on every day just to get blood flow to Achilles and patellar tendons. And because I'm hooked on that, because it keeps my body feeling great. And that's why on Tuesday this week, I set another of my unofficial world records that plenty of people could do, but no one's really trying. Yeah. Although definitely less than 1% of the 1% of the population could do. But the point is other people can do them, which is I dunked every minute on the minute for 100 straight minutes. So I did 100 minutes straight, dunking every minute on the minute. And the next day, after not Olympic lifting for years, I power snatched my body weight, without even warming up for it. I did maximal deadlifts first. So I did a snatch grip deadlift rather than clean grip, because snatch grip keeps it just a little bit safer that you're not going to go too far. But every rep, if I can get it up, now I'm trying to fight it down as an RDL, putting that thing down as quietly as I can. So again, the guy I trained with here from Hong Kong, he could get it up easily, but could not. The weight would come crashing down when he would try to lower it down in an RDL, because his quads are stronger than his lower back. So for him, his lower back will always be a sticking point unless he addresses that. So we did those first all the way up to a maximum. Now you take the weight off. Now that power snatch feels really light. Not for an Olympic weightlifter, because they're seasoned in it, but for a guy like me who doesn't Olympic weightlift, that it's less about technique and more about that weight just feeling freaking light. Yeah. And so I did one rep at 60 kilo, one rep at 70 kilo, and one rep at 80 kilo. I weigh 80 kilo, and that was it. That was my session. And I had never been able to power snatch. I'd been able to power snatch almost body weight, but not quite. I never got to body weight power snatch. So here I am doing a new record for myself after not lifting Olympic lifting in a couple of years. It just goes to show that there's a lot to know about training, and all the rules of training are not known. There's a lot of rules that we're still uncovering. And just by working on isolation movements and flexibility, I PR'd the very lift, which is the number one test of athleticism, is a power snatch. Yeah. And so, and I did that the day after my 100 dunks. So it's like you said, like when your body feels good, you want to do something with it. Yesterday we were doing our team podcast, drinking my vanilla latte because one of the guys got an iced vanilla latte. So I'm like, let me try this shit. And by the end of it, I want to lift, you know what I mean? And it's like, geez, like I had already done my super high altitude drops that day, the day before that, basketball, the day before that, all the lifting. I mean, I've been doing crazy stuff nonstop all week, and I wanted more. I can promise you, as soon as we hang up, I'm going outside to my little studio gym, because my blood starts flowing. I start thinking about training, and I want to do something.
He's an Energizer bunny.
Oh, that's my wife. So, but I'm really not. I'm really a lazy piece of shit. It's just you find things that work.
Yeah, that's right. It's like I'll be, jonesing to get in here and do some post chain work, but then my wife will be like, "Did you rake the leaves?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I don't have as much energy to go do that, but I don't need to get it done." But
yeah,
I think, I mean, that's definitely one of the aspects of it for me, is just like every day I just feel like I could lift again. It's been amazing. And then I think it is too the community too, being dialed in and linked in with Keegan and you and Jeff, Mr. Infinity, like the daily, just seeing what you guys are doing daily. Yeah. Just like, I don't know what it is. It's just you see that stuff and it's like a totally different mindset. Like a switch goes off and you just feel like, I see you guys do that seated good morning, and I'm like, I got to go do that right now. Or you were playing with the kneeling, doing kneeling body weight. I don't even know what that was, but I was like, I really want to do that.
I don't know what it was either. But But basically, I'm trying to figure out, for Olympic lifting guys, how to do it, because it's kind of like basketball is a skill sport, right? So Olympic weightlifting is the same thing. And so there's a lot of skill involved. You do have to practice it a lot. So how do you practice it a lot, but have your body feeling great? And if you look at the Chinese, they have like the healthiest bodies of Olympic weightlifters. Not perfect, but much healthier. And even in the Chinese camps, they say, okay, what's the difference between the guy who's national level and the guy who wins the gold medal in the Olympics? Flexibility.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to think about a different camp, Average Bros in Las Vegas. You know what I'm talking about? John Bros.
Oh, yeah, John Bros. Yeah.
Okay. I have a ton of respect for him, but I've also been there in person and trained with him in Las Vegas. Number one, ton of respect for him. Number two, even though when you walk in, you're like scared shitless because he looks really intimidating and he looks like he's an asshole, he's one of the nicer guys you'll ever meet in terms of being a genuine person.
Yeah.
I didn't know shit about Olympic weightlifting. I was there because I fell in love with Knees Over Toes, and he took the kindness out of his day to help me out, and he had no idea who I was or anything. I was just a random ass person who paid his $20 or whatever to do a day pass.
Yeah.
And my lifting form was probably horrible, and rather than cursing me out, he was super nice. But I do just want to point out that they do center things on just doing those lifts, and I think they prove the power in the practice side of it, except they are not as healthy as the guys who are then taking care of their body in addition to that. It's the same with basketball. It's the same with basketball that you best skill coaches in the world, their players are also struggling. So I that's kind of what I'm looking at is how do you get someone that's like my system, you can do some of these daily things and you can keep playing basketball and feel amazing rather than quit your team, So it's the same for Olympic weightlifting. That's kind of what I was experimenting there. But I think there's a way to kind of perfectly integrate the skill of the sport with the accessory movements you need for it, whether it be powerlifting, your skill would be bench, squat, deadlift. Olympic lifting now gets even a little bit more technical, and then now say something like baseball. They're out there with their dicks in their hands, pissing into the wind with their training for the most part. I'm not saying they're all bad, but for the most part, because it's so technical that then they don't know where to channel their energy. And again, that's not all, but I've seen a lot of really bad baseball training, once it gets to sports like basketball, baseball, soccer, where they're technical all day long, the players are already hurting by the time they even get old enough to have strength coaches. And so now the strength coaches are trying to avoid, all the problem areas in the weight room. And then the strength coaches have the pressure to look cool and to be either driving up, the bench press or the speed ladder or whatever it is, that is just not what the athlete needs. So I know I kind of ranted a little bit there on different things, but the point is still that we're trying to figure it out rather than saying it's okay to have knee surgeries. It's okay to wake up with daily back pain. It's okay to have imbalances between one side and the other. I think strength coaches used to laugh at stuff like that. It's okay to not touch your toes, but have a strong deadlift. It's not okay. And I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to say is that, every day I just wake up to keep helping people not be in pain. So then how much more fun is it when you can do your lift or whatever it is without pain,
Yeah. And exploring the boundaries of like outside the box.
Yep.
That's, not being satisfied with whatever the presentation this year is of how you should, lift weights or whatever. It's just think outside the box because life is outside the box. Like you can't say that, moving in a linear fashion in the weight room is going to make you be prepared, right? So yeah, maybe not knowing what it was you were creating with the kneeling squat there, but knowing that that is an aspect that someone could be presented with, that's what we want to be doing is creating those different ways of looking at kind of the big picture, right?
Yeah. Yeah. For anyone who's listening, because I didn't make a post on it. It was just on my story, so it's gone. But so imagine just a nice quality, just imagine like an ass to grass back squat. So what I was doing is I took one of my feet, I put it behind. Some people may have seen something like this, like a kickstand squat, something of that nature. So specifically what I was going for was a nice hamstring cover the calf squat, except with one leg behind me a bit, the other leg I'm going knee to floor. So that was like cheeks to sneaks. Like my glute is like on my Achilles. I'm getting actually, you know what I felt the most on that? Plantar fascia stretch.
Yeah.
Really nice plantar fascia stretch. And now out of the bottom, I'm pausing. And then I'm really thinking with that back leg, the one that's all the way knee to floor, because it's like with Olympic weightlifting, when you catch in the bottom position, it's not always going to be in a perfect world. And so the idea for me on that one was that maybe it could be used as an assistance exercise for Olympic weightlifters so that a normal Olympic lift now becomes like easy to catch because you're prepared for your knees even way farther. So that's the concept I was going for. I found I had to modify it. Number one, I don't like just slamming your knee into the ground. So I stood one foot on a plate, and then the other foot, I brought the knee to a pad. So I put a pad on the floor so that I was still standing like even height on the ground, but with one knee resting on a pad on the floor instead of just right on the hard ground. I liked it for really connecting with that back leg. You talk about driving up quad strength and getting insane ankle mobility. Really nice. It's like a loaded ankle mobility drill. But in my core beliefs on what makes an exercise work, it is a little bit harder to just channel your strength and know how much that back leg is pushing. So whereas like a split squat, there's just no gray area the way I teach a split squat. There's zero gray area. So I didn't find that version of squat useful enough to keep in because I don't like so much drills. I like measurable, strict things because I do believe in those principles of driving up strength. Yeah. So that's where I think some people who identify with what I do, they actually kind of miss the big picture and they think of the exercise I do as nice little, dinky assistance exercises like we were talking about, but they miss the value in actually dedicated year-long strength work and where that can get you. And so, split squat, seated good morning, and neck press are still my three exercises of choice as assistance exercises for Olympic lifting, even though I was trying a bunch of other crazy shit.
Which is all right.
Yeah.
I wanted to just kind of turn the discussion now more towards flexibility because, part of your journey too, like really appealing to me is in like, along with all the strength aspects as well as like unlocking this superior flexibility is demonstration. You'll watch your channel and see you dunk and then drop into splits. Yeah. And just unheard of kind of for most people, like outside of our community for sure. So kind of directing the conversation that way, can we talk about like the early stages of your flexibility journey to where it is now, where I think you're more on like a maintenance kind of level now where you can,
yes.
discuss that.
I absolutely love the subject of flexibility. So my first experience with it was basically, growing up as a kid, thinking you're stretching, because like on every basketball team, the coaches are usually doing their best and they're like, they make you stretch as a team, but these are like 10-second holds in like a few garbage stretches. Yeah. And that 10 seconds is probably more like 5 seconds as fast as we're counting. So most athletes are actually just like completely wasting their time when they're stretching. And then I got into all the functional stuff and should it be dynamic stretching and all the foam rolling. And before I knew it, I had like a 45-minute warm up, yet my knees were still shit, blah, blah, blah. Makes me want to vomit when I think back to it. Then I thought flexibility was a waste of time because I got really good at hamstring stretches. So I thought, oh, I'm flexible. Why do I still have problems? Because that's one freaking area of flexibility.
Right.
And that is where some bullshit statements come out. The most famous basketball trainer right now has tons of teenagers everywhere worried about hypermobility. Number one. All right, I doubt any teenage basketball players are listening to Strength Podcast. They should be. But if they are, or if you have a teenage kid who plays sports, I can promise you they are not going to be hypermobile. They are the last people on earth who need to be hypermobile. Mm-hmm. They are so tight, it's a problem. So, but he has them worried about it because he made a statement, not based on any studies, just his observation, that the more flexible athletes are the ones with more injuries. And I would immediately argue that guys who have had a lot of injuries, who are still at the professional level, are fighting and clawing their way to stay at the top and do anything they can to get an advantage. And that's why they're stretching. They weren't flexible and got hurt because they were flexible. They're stretching because they've been through injuries and they're just doing everything they can. It was the same with me. I had the injuries. Then someone could have observed, oh, wow, this guy's flexible, yet had horrible knee injuries. But I wasn't flexible before the knee injuries. I got flexible after them because I was trying. And I really wasn't stretching hardly at all what I needed for my knees. So that right off the bat, you can see that there's a lot of like false ideas that get going about flexibility in sports training. Number one, I can just promise you that if you're playing a sport, you're not too flexible. End of story. Yeah. Number two is that if you think you're flexible, you're probably not. You're probably flexible in like one or two stretches.
Right.
And even those, you're probably even not that flexible. You're probably just more flexible than the other guys who, on your team. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I was. I never even could do a palms to floor pike or anything, but I could touch my toes easily. No one else could. Oh man, how do I still have pain in my body? I can touch my toes. Well, like I said already a couple of times, just one area of flexibility.
Right.
Then I got into flexibility because I found that the movements that I really needed strength-wise actually relied on a lot of flexibility. But this is where it took a turning point for me, is I decided for myself that, when my mission really became to make other athletes healthy, and when I could see that I did have tools that work for athletes, I was always trying to operate on how little do I need? Not how much can I add to a program? How little do I need? So I've been through many phases of trying to not stretch at all and see if I can just get away with certain stuff. Well, let me tell you, after some years of that, I stretch every day now. So what does that tell you? It's just the yin to the yang of strength training. And my original mentor there, Charles Poliquin, told me in person that his number one regret in life was not getting into flexibility sooner. And so if I'm a guy who wants, I want to use the least tools I have to possible. And as you can see with some of my movements, I've got great, I can do a front splits without doing any stretching for hip flexors and for hamstrings because of split squat, ATG style, split squats, Jefferson curls, Romanian deadlifts. But as soon as we get into the groin stuff and into the piriformis stuff, so as soon as we get into lateral movement, it just gets a little bit trickier to load. Not to mention when I just go with the approach of, okay, I'll maintain my front splits with split squat and Jefferson curl, your calves start getting tight. Yeah. And then your rectus femoris starts getting tight, and that can start tugging on your knee and giving you symptoms of knee tendonitis. So most guys have actually really tight quads and they don't realize it. And then most guys have super tight adductors and groin and piriformis, and that really makes their knees and back feel janky. So I don't know if janky is a word, but for me, janky is a word. And if you just try to think that you can do it without stretching, I've just tried it so many times, and the jankiness level just keeps going up. And when you don't feel janky, though, you want to go move your body. You know what I mean? So I think so many times in life we just think, oh, what if I could just do one thing and neglect another thing? And if I only had to do one thing, and then it's like, shit, it's really the balance that was needed.
Yeah.
And so at the very least, if you want to be your best, at the very, very least, the stretching is relaxing your nervous system and you're going to get better recovery. Mm-hmm. So even if you just do it from a perspective of letting your muscles relax. Mm-hmm. My dog is not even 2. He's much faster than me, although I'm working on it. And he stretches every day. You can see him like constantly like limbering up and stretching. And it's just, I look at that and I'm like, our bodies want to, just like they like really good strength training. They like really good flexibility work. And I just haven't seen anything that matches working on both of them. And I've seen a lot of guys fail by working on one or the other. Because I've also seen guys who do really intense stretching programs, but since they're not doing strength work, it's kind of easier for them to get into those little tweaks and like, you know what I mean? The little strains. Because I feel like if you're not strengthening your hamstrings at all, and then you're just stretching the crap out of them, you can kind of end up with some strains going on.
Yep.
And so again, I feel like you can feel janky either way if you're, so yeah, I like to spend about 12 minutes a day working on 90-90 internal, external kind of stretching, like internal, external hip rotation kind of stretching. I like to stretch my calves every day. As I said, I do as little as I possibly need. And I really like to work on like couch stretch. And with all these stretches, I'm just relaxing. I'm just chilling. I'm not ripping stuff apart. And if I played other sports, I'd go even farther than that. You know, if I was a hockey goalie, I would have my middle splits down. You know, like, so I still do what I think is the bare minimum that I need to feel amazing on the basketball court. But even that minimum, I stretch like 20 minutes a day. But I do center it around those areas: external, internal hip rotation, calves, and like rectus femoris stretching, because I am doing Jefferson curls and weighted butterflies and split squats. And so I actually am like my strength movements cover a lot.
Yeah, I think you're really isolating it there too, because I actually have found myself doing the exact same daily routine as the 90-90 internal, external, calves, and rectus femoris, because I think that when you do look at those big demonstrations of flexibility, those areas aren't really isolated.
Yeah.
And those areas tend to be the ones that we are tight in on a daily basis, you know, like the quads, ankles, glute med, internal hip rotation, like those are, it's kind of like those are the big four that maybe a lot of people aren't thinking about for sure. And
I find people can be, you take an athlete who's gotten to the pro level, and almost exclusively those areas are so neglected. They're so tight, and they honestly believe that daily knee and back pain is part of life.
Yeah, for sure. We've had a couple back and forth discussions a little bit about like juggling, and like I guess when we refer to that, we think about like in real movement, we use it as like, you know, training the mind, connecting hands to the brain, feet to the brain, things like that with different aspects. And I know you've played with it a little bit, but do you have any other mechanisms of training the mind or addressing kind of like metaphysical aspects of training, like in your own way that you don't present as much? Or
Totally. I mean, for one thing, when I step foot on a basketball court, I lace up my shoes, and then I do a very extensive and precise 2 basketball dribbling workout.
I've seen that.
Before I start playing basketball, I've already dribbled 2 basketballs any way that I'll possibly dribble 1 basketball. And I make my whole troop of guys do it, and I get the NBA guys to buy into it, and everyone buys into it. So if I can get these guys to buy into it, something about that is working. So it's not like I sit down and have like an interview with each guy after to ask them about the mental aspects of it. But So I essentially do my own version of juggling, which is doing these actually really hard to do. Like it's something I do that if you haven't practiced it like 1,000 hours, I promise you just can't do it. You know what I mean? And so, but it has anyone, like I've taken kids who have never played basketball before and they're like family friends and they just want to start playing basketball. And I start them with those drills. And you know what? They dedicate and they can eventually do it. So like anyone can do it, just like juggling. I'm sure you don't start guys off and be like, this guy's never going to make it. You know, like if you put in the work, you'll get there. Yeah. And you know, it's very interesting because I've had guys who are dorkier and who have less control over their body. Some of the most book smart guys can take much longer to get down the 2-ball dribbling, but they eventually do get it down, and that works wonders for their control on the basketball court. So I do think there's a lot of things going on there, from the coordination of your body to I work often on a scale that at the bottom you would have not know, like where you just don't know what's going on. And that would usually be someone when they start. And then as you come up, you get to where you can think about it. And that's more than not even knowing, but you have to think about it. And then at the top is just know. And it's like, you don't even have to think about it, but it's not like you're just shutting off your mind. It's actually like a much higher state where you just know where something's going to be. You know what's going to happen. And I feel like that's the level that you're trying to get at, whether it be a lift or a sport or whatever, where you just know and you have that full confidence. And so like, that's what we're trying to get to with our 2 basketball dribbling drills. So I think it has strong effects mentally on your confidence and coordination. And then with that in place, and this is where there is something going on mentally, because I teach guys how to break down. Like if you were to watch a basketball game, and if you were to notice the guy in the game who is the best at faking people out with his dribbles and with his footwork and stuff, right? There's a lot going on with footwork in basketball. And that's one of the things I teach. And I'm telling you, one for one, the better someone is at these 2-ball drills, the easier it is for them to pick up footwork. So what's going on with that? It's the wildest thing. And every time someone's struggling with footwork, I just tell them more 2-ball dribbling, more 2-ball dribbling. Quit bitching and moaning, more 2-ball dribbling. You just haven't put in the work yet. And they get the 2-ball dribbling down, and then it's so easy to pick up their footwork. So there's something going on there just in terms of being able to control your body without thinking about it, because you don't have time on an Olympic lift to be thinking. You know how many different things happen, even on a squat or a deadlift. There's a lot of different things happening. So in training, of course, like there's things you can put your intention on, but a lot of things still have to happen on their own without thinking about it. And I think that's where it helps. I think it makes more confident athletes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And my thing too, with like most lifts or other exercises when I'm coaching people, is only think of 1 or 2 cues.
That's a great tip.
Yeah. Evaluate how that set went afterwards and see what you need to, like what 1 or 2 cues you need to work on the next one. Because there's 30 cues for all things, right? And that's
exactly what I do. And I think I just do one, you know what I mean? So whether it's a lift, I'm coaching a guy in the gym, or whether we're going into an actual basketball competition where we're playing against each other one-on-one, I try to get guys to think about just one aspect, which is almost like their weak link. And then if you channel all your intention on that weak link, then you can actually bring up that weak link. So there's definitely something to it that, you know, that the more you can control your body with your mind, the better results you're going to get.
For sure. I did get a couple questions here, just to tie in a little bit. I don't want to keep you too long. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me on Saturday.
I really appreciate it. I've been dying to talk to you for a while.
But a good question that came up was what, you know, with all this, the work on the knees and everything, like obviously related to lower body and feet and stuff, is what's your thought on training barefoot?
Oh yeah, that's another really good question, and it's, for me, it's again, I live for my clients, and so it's not always realistic that people are just going to be like in commercial gyms training barefoot or things like that. So everything I do, I try to do as simple as possible first. And at the moment, I'm just not running into any sticking points by training with shoes on. So like at my gym, some people will even ask, "Oh, can I take my shoes off?" Hell yeah, go for it. You know what I mean? But it's not something that I found I have to make people do to get the results that I'm trying to create. Right. Could you get even more benefit? You probably could. You know what I mean? But it's for the same reason that I don't force people to eat only a specific diet or another when they're trying to rebuild their knees. I find that's not a sticking point when you're rebuilding your knees. So it's the same with barefoot, but in general, I encourage guys to wear shoes that sure as heck don't cut off your ankle mobility, you know. Mm-hmm. And you will notice a lot of guys, like, I don't wear barefoot shoes, but I wear $19 water shoes off Amazon. That's what you see me doing all my lifts in, from my power snatch to my altitude. I'm doing those altitude drops. I'm doing my squats, power snatches, whatever, wearing $19 shoes with no laces off Amazon. So I'm definitely getting more of a feel of the ground. That's for sure. You know, like, they're very like flimsy. They're very flimsy shoes. And even in basketball, I've been looking for years for like a zero drop basketball shoe. It doesn't exist, but there's one shoe that was made like 4 years ago that I finally found a couple weeks ago, and it's been my favorite shoe I've ever worn. And it's almost like they made it for a player who's known for playing really low to the ground, having really quick feet, and like being really grippy on the floor. So if you imagine the heel of the shoe, normally a basketball heel is like this big cushion to try to give you more shock absorption. But I want less. I want to be feeling the ground. And so this shoe, it just starts to curve up. So the whole shoe is like curves up in the back so that you don't have this big heel cushion. So right off the bat, like day one when I wore them, I had so much of that good DOMS in like the tibialis muscles, no joint pain at all, no shin splint pain, but just like so much good DOMS in the lower leg muscles the way I wanted, because I could feel like I was handling more of the force myself. And that's what I want, so then I can adapt. So I'm already feeling quicker, better in these shoes. So yeah, I look for more minimalistic style, but I don't go full on barefoot because it's just not conducive for my lifestyle. And I don't want to be using something and making something integral in my program that not everyone's going to do. You know, most basketball players, they're too cool for school. Like, they're really worried about wearing the latest stylish shoes. So, you know, if I know they're going to be wearing those shoes, I need to know my program still works. So, you know, again, maybe someday I'll dive deeper into that. But at the moment, I look for a more minimalistic style, but still with, you know, enough cushion. I walk my dog all the time, so that's why I originally got these water shoes. So knock on wood, I haven't stepped in shit since I got them. But when you step in poop in nice shoes, so good. I just throw them away. So so that's why I switched to these water like $19 shoes, which are very minimalistic. And same with the basketball shoes. As you can see, I want something it's still a basketball shoe. You know what I mean? But it's, for being a basketball shoe, it's more minimalistic.
Awesome. Congrats on the launch of the clothing line.
Oh, appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the shorts.
I can't wait.
It's hard to find a good, like, specific pair of shorts for sure, like with the lifting and everything that are, I guess the other aspect too is the flashiness of it too. Yeah, looking forward to showing off the quads.
I think you're really going to like them. The functionality's all there. Yeah. One thing I like is they stay totally dry. They're very comfortable. And I mean, even for me, they've got like a zipper pocket in the back, which is really subtle. So when I play basketball, I've got my wedding ring in my back pocket. I don't like leaving it like in my shoe or something on the sideline. You know what I mean? So they're very versatile for guys, but yeah, they're a little bit flashier. And to me, that matters because it's like just getting that mind muscle connection with my legs, being a guy who used to specialize in the long pants, wife beater and long pants, no leg day. You know what I mean?
We need to see a pic of those days soon.
Oh my God. I mean, my before and after, you can see my legs were twigs and my upper body was pretty massive. But the point is, I think for guys who have been through knee surgeries and stuff, it's a badge of courage to figure out how to grow your legs back. And so so the shorts are a little more meaningful to me. And it's me and my wife, I'm an online coach now, so I'm home a lot. So she really runs the shorts business. She does all the hard work. I just help market them. Yeah. That's all her. So it gives her a business to keep herself busy with, to create on. Then, me and her, by having a business together, it turns our leisure time into productive work time. Yeah. This shorts thing is something we never had to start as a totally wild idea. And we're already making extra money. And then once they'll be here and they arrive in America in like 2 days or something. So as soon, once we can really get rolling, because we opened up the pre-sale so we could get like all the shipping labels ready. And you know what I mean? We don't want to be taking people's orders and then have to make the shipping label. We want to be ready so that we can get them out. Because it looks like December 2nd, I think, is the day we can send them out. So that's we want to fire them out so everyone has them before Christmas. But the point is, 5-10 years from now, we'll probably be set financially anyways, but then have a whole different line of income that we did in our free time when we could have been watching Netflix. You know what I mean? So, and it's not like we don't still watch something if we want, but the point is that that's time you're going to be spending with your spouse anyways. I highly recommend, if you can, have a business with your spouse, because it increases, you still get your quality time together, but it's something like creating for your future. So, and it's something also as well that I know how responsible we are as people. I'm not a greedy person, but I almost feel a duty to, if I can have successful businesses that make money, I want to, because I know I'm going to be one of those people who's using the money for good reasons, Right. So me and my wife have a lot of different humanitarian goals, from silly stuff like, trying to make a difference for dogs and animal shelters and stuff like that. So it's like, if we have people are going to be buying clothes anyways, you know what I mean? Right. What's wrong with us taking a little chip out of that market and doing some good with it or whatever, So as soon as you talk about anything like that, it can get all political, and then people are like, why aren't you a vegan? And then I'm like, I just take the post down. But you get my point, is that there's nothing wrong with having a quality business, especially if you're a person that's going to be using that overall, you know what I mean, is going to be using that money for good. So it fits with our lifestyle very well.
Where are things at right now with your dream to play in the NBA?
4 years out.
4 years out?
Yeah, I made a 5-year plan last year to get to the NBA. So the plan centers around me getting really, really freaking good. And you don't see the highlights online when I'm playing against pros, because that's just not good karma to be putting your people on social media. You know what I mean? But again, I told you, they're not listening to this one. So I can tell you, I'm kicking ass against really high level players. But I have to if you want to get there with no pedigree, that's just you got to be a different breed. So for one thing, I can have no weak links. I need to be even freakier athletic. I need to be to where I can never have a bad shooting day. I need to basically try to be the best point guard in the world. Mm-hmm. And then I need to be training, I have to be training some of the most famous basketball players in the world, and have them where they're just looking at it kind of like, shit, this guy, he's better than our backup point guard on my team, give him a shot. And so my whole angle at it is that 4 years from now, I think I'll be good enough and well-known enough as a trainer that multiple NBA teams will want me to be their strength coach. And so if multiple teams want me to be their strength coach, if I can even make them 20% healthier, they get 15 roster spots. 20% healthier is more than one roster spot. So you might as well just give me a roster spot but that's my price. Like, I'm not working for any of you. But then if different teams want me to be the strength coach, one team might come to the table and say, shit, we want you to be the strength coach enough that will give you a roster spot. Then the rest is up to me to, to be my obsessive self and figure out, how to produce.
Yeah. I think you'll get there sooner than 4 years, man.
Well, I appreciate that, but I do everything pretty conservatively. I'd rather beat my expectations, and than set things that aren't as realistic. Because I think most people underestimate, I want to, like right now is probably the key time that people are like, I want to add 50 pounds to my squat by Christmas or whatever, like, if you can add 10 pounds a week to your squat, so you're going to add what, 520 pounds in the next year? I think people look at short-term goals and they don't reflect them against long-term goals. So I try to reflect them against long-term goals. And then if anything, beating it is fine. But I think some people actually set themselves up for failure by trying to rush things.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely that's the key, right? Is like not looking at the big picture as to why you're doing it, and but finding ways to keep your head in the game so that you keep doing it. That's kind of like, the fine point there, like the tricky area.
Yep. I'm sure you get this a lot. Like, how long will it take me to do a splits?
Oh yeah.
Well, first off, Ravi Patel 23, who I don't know anything about you, that you literally just said, hi, how long will it take me to do a splits? I have no idea where you are right now.
Yeah, that's right.
And what is the time? Like, so it's like 6 weeks. Like, would that be worth it? But then like 12 weeks wouldn't? Because then if you try to do it in 6, you might get hurt just trying, anyways, yeah. I could probably interview you on a podcast with only that question of people asking you, how long will it take me to do blah?
And that's kind of been the big project with Keegan, in bringing side split to the forefront in a different aspect, in a different way, is like, I think too, in what you guys have been doing with ATG has kind of brought that together as well, to say like, well, because that is something you do want to consider, like what you were saying is like, what's the minimal amount of work that I need to do to get there? And that's kind of been part of my research into the splits, has been, once I unlocked the splits, or however long it took me to get there, was like, what's the minimal amount of work that someone needs to do after I did all of these things that were kind of a little crazy?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of what we're honing in on, or, like,
that's what I look for, is the simplest route. I'm not thinking about the time,
Yeah.
And I get these questions on, hey, I've had patellar tendonitis for the last 4 years. How long will it take me to get rid of it? What really matters is, can I get rid of it? And yes, you can. But like, you've had it for 4 years. So then it's like, does it matter 6 or 8 weeks? Like, you've had it for 4 years. But definitely, I think I was even going to ask you, one of the things I was going to ask you in this conversation was, because I've never gotten to a middle splits. I've never even gotten close, really. But I can do like a front splits, but not a middle splits. Mm-hmm. And I know you being in Canada, and I've seen different like hockey goalies and stuff, often have to get into that position, and just you having more experience. So for someone of my height, my crossover move, it's not so much about the quickness of the ball. It's actually like how quickly and how far I can fake in one direction and then go the other direction. It's not the ball that actually makes the move work. It's your foot. It's how far your foot, because the defender has to react. If your foot goes there, he's got to react. Right. So do you think getting to a middle split would have an effect on my crossover?
In a positive way?
Yeah.
Maybe I have to see where you're at with your middle split.
Okay. All right. Do you think that me being a strength coach predominantly for basketball players, but you see all the stuff I do.
Yeah.
Will I gain new perspective by getting to a middle splits as well? Is it worth the time? Or not really the time, but is it worth, should I get to it so that I know what it's like?
Well, maybe the question, like the thought or the perception of the question has to change. Is, do you have to get there? Maybe isn't the case, but should you train it?
Should I train it? Good
Right.
point. Good
So
point.
if the split squat itself is really just the widest squat your body can obtain.
Yeah.
It's the same pelvic position as a squat once you get to that end range.
Yep.
So when it comes to training range, why not train that range and not even have the mindset of saying, does it even matter if I get there? I'm still addressing that,
right.
That lengthened groin position. I'm getting stronger. Your range will get lower probably, but it's not even a stressor of whether or not you get there. I think it's just training that range.
Yep. And I have trained guys and myself weighted butterfly, like so putting some dumbbells on your knees.
Yep.
Weighted butterfly knees to floor to me is a standard for being a basketball player. Sure. To me, you're like, I've done that with basketball players. I've never trained myself towards middle splits. I've never trained basketball players towards middle splits, but I have trained them and myself to knees to floor weighted butterfly.
Yeah.
To me, that's huge. I absolutely love that.
And so
I think it could be, I think it might be, I'm going to jump on it and train it.
Yeah. And too, with I guess looking at your strength in a standing position, what's your strength look like, right? And horse stance is good. Horse stance is more hip specific, but like straight leg, straddle stance, if you want to call it that, like that's more specific to that straight leg position and adductor groin kind of strength. So there has to be, I think, an address of both there, like horse stance and straight leg, like straddle, like where you're at. You see a lot of us in the real movement, you've probably seen like Keegan and I and some others doing like that standing straddle kind of push up.
Yep.
Like that's kind of a good way to unload and load that end range and maybe just address that strength. But yeah, there's lots of stuff we could do a probably whole podcast on side split if you wanted to.
Okay.
But
well,
I'm
just saying I'm gonna train it because also I have a lot of martial artists reach out and I feel like that would have a lot of carryover there.
Yeah.
And so the benefits I've had from getting to front split, I think I'll feel even better if I get to middle split. So,
and I mean,
I'm going to do it. So when we end off this call, I'm going to start, I'm going to look up so where will I tell my followers, like when we finish this podcast, I'm going to tell my followers, if anyone wants to join me getting to middle split, where do I tell them to find your middle split protocol?
That's on the Real Movement athlete.
Good. So then I'll tag Real Movement and I'll tag you.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna work towards it. And see, for me, I really don't even have a thought on the time. It's not about the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think performance-wise, like with everything you're talking about, it is about, I think, addressing that strength and that range. Like, you know, you don't necessarily need to do a side split or maybe look toward how long it's going to take, but
I'd like to get to it to know what it's like at that level. Same with I don't think someone has to achieve a front split, but I sure as hell think you can and should. So I'm going to try to get the middle split. I'm trying to be basically like Bruce Lee on a basketball court. If you could imagine, that's my style.
that would
that's
be awesome.
My style of play. Like I'm just an ultimate pest. So.
You can definitely set yourself up for it, I think, for sure.
Good. Well, I'm going to tell them to get on there with me and try to get some motivation going and get a group of guys going towards the middle split. I'm going to tag Jeff because I think he could do it at one time, but I don't think he can right now.
Yeah, so, definitely think he could be smashing that out of the park. He just hasn't been working on it as much, I think.
Yeah. So I want to know what that's like. All right, I'm excited, man. I've looked up to you since the day I first saw you because I saw you could do things that I was like, shit, I know range of motion, and this guy knows range of motion even better than I do. And so I've been pretty fascinated ever since then. So I'm excited to learn more from you.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. Appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. I look forward to sharing this with everyone and working together with you a little closer.
Love it, man. I'm excited.
Okay, man. I'll end it off there, and we'll be chatting more offline soon.
Yeah, and if anyone didn't hit end yet, whenever someone takes the time to do a podcast with me, I always give them for anyone listening, ATG 15 gets them $15 off their first month with us online. It's $50 a month, but there's no long-term contract, and that's how much I personally take out myself, like as my cut. So that's basically my way of like, this is free marketing. It's the great thing about collaborating with other people. And so I try to invite people, if they want to try it, I try to make it a little bit easier on their wallet to try it. So they could even so the bare minimum, you could even do a $34.50, learn all my stuff, cancel at the end of the month, and go on your way. But that's the lowest I can get it.
Awesome. I'll make sure I promote that in the notes as well.
Sweet. Appreciate that.
All right, Ben.
All right, man.
Enjoy.
We off?